The morning after we buried my husband, I walked out to his workshop with the key in my hand, and I did not unlock it. I turned it the other way. I locked a door that had not been locked one single time in 22 years. Then I put that key in my apron pocket, and I walked back across the yard, and I made breakfast for 11 people who had slept in my house. That was October of 1984. The door is still locked this morning, 42 years. Everyone in my church district thought they knew why. My own children think they know why. My sister thought she knew, and she is buried now too, and she went into the ground being wrong about it. They all believed it was grief, that a woman could not bear to walk into a room that still smelled like her husband's hands. That is a gentle story. It let people be kind to me for 4 decades. It let them bring me pie and speak softly and never ask. It was not true, because I had already been inside that workshop once. The night before the funeral, after the house had finally gone quiet, I carried a lamp out across the frozen yard in my stocking feet, and I opened that door and I stood inside it for a very long time. And what I found on his workbench and what I found in the second drawer underneath it is the reason I locked that door in the morning. I have never told this to my children. 2 of them are gone now. I am 83 years old, and I am not going to take it with me. 22 years, I lived 40 steps from that building. 40 steps. I counted them once, years later, in the snow, just to know the number. 22 years I carried his dinner out on a plate with a towel over it so it would still be warm. 22 years I heard that diesel engine start up at 6 in the morning, and I knew what it meant the way you know your own heartbeat, which is to say I did not think about it at all. 22 years I believed I knew what my husband did all day. Stay with me, because what was sitting on that workbench is going to tell you something about the man you married, or the man who raised you, or the man you are yourself. It made me angry for a very long time, longer than I will admit to my daughters, and it took me until I was past 70 to understand that it was also the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me, and the loneliest, and that those 2 things can be the same thing wearing the same coat. My name is Anna. I am 83 years old. I was born Old Order Amish in LaGrange County, Indiana, and I did not leave until I was 72, which is a story for another day. This is Hannah, the Amish girl, the channel where women like me finally say the things we were never permitted to say out loud. And today, the story is mine. My granddaughter writes my words down as I speak them, because I never learned to use these machines, and I am too old to start. If you want the truth about Amish life from the people who actually lived inside it, subscribe and tap the like button, and then do one thing for me in the comments. Tell me if there is a room in your family's house that nobody opens. Just that. My granddaughter reads them to me on Sunday afternoons, and I want to know how many of us there are. Now let me tell you how a marriage like mine was built, because you cannot understand that locked door until you understand the walls it was set into. I married Amos in November of 1962. I was 19. He was 25, which was considered late, and people talked about that a little. He was a furniture maker, which in our district also meant he was the man who built the coffins. That was not a separate job. It was not a business. There was no sign on the road. It was simply understood that when someone in our district died, you went to Amos. Our shop was a low white building with a line shaft running the ceiling, and a diesel engine outside to turn it because we did not take electricity from the lines. It smelled like pine shavings and linseed oil and cold iron. 22 years, 6 children, 4 still living. And in all of it, there were 3 rules about a man's work and a woman's place beside it. Nobody ever wrote them down. Nobody had to. Every one of us learned them before we learned to read. The first rule was separation. The shop was his. The house was mine. I went out there to bring food, and I came back. I did not stand in the doorway and ask about his day. He did not come into my kitchen and ask why I was crying over the beans. This was not cruelty. It was order. The Ordnung, our unwritten rule that shaped every hour of our lives, made everything neat by making everything separate. The second rule was Gelassenheit, yielding. Gelassenheit means you do not press. You do not ask a man what is heavy. You wait for him to set it down on his own, and if he never does, you leave it exactly where it is, because pressing him would be pride. And pride is Hochmut, and Hochmut is the worst thing a person in my world could be. And the third rule is the one that did the damage, and it is the one everybody called love. A good husband spares his wife. That is it. That is the whole rule. He carries what is heavy so that she does not have to. He does not set it in her lap. He does not bring the graveyard into the kitchen. A man who tells his wife everything is a man who has made his burden into her burden. And in my community, that was not honesty. That was weakness. That was a failure of love. Put those 3 rules together, and you can build a marriage of 22 years in which 2 people love each other every single day. And one of them is carrying something the other one has never once heard the name of. Those are the rules. Now let me tell you what was actually on that bench. It was the 14th of October. The viewing had been in our front room for 2 days. Benches along the walls, 300 people through the door. The last buggy left around 9. The house went quiet in that particular way a house goes quiet when it is full of people sleeping. And I could not stay in it. So I took the lamp off the kitchen table and I went out in my stocking feet across the yard, and the ground was already frozen hard enough to hurt, and I did not care. The door was not locked. It had never been locked. I pushed it open, and the cold came out at me smelling like his shop, which smelled like him, and that nearly put me on my knees right there in the doorway. His apron was on the nail. It still held the shape of him. His plane was on the bench where he left it, and beside it a rag still folded, because Amos folded everything. And on the bench, under a piece of clean muslin, there was a coffin. It was small. I want you to understand how small. It was not a child's coffin the way you might picture one. It was the size of a breadboard. It was sanded smooth on the top and the sides, and the lid was not on yet. And there was no name on it, and no date. And there had not been a child that died in our district in more than a year. I am not going to sugarcoat what I felt, because it was not a good feeling, and I have had 42 years to be ashamed of it. I thought, he was building this for somebody, and he did not tell me who. I stood in a cold shop the night before I buried my husband, holding a lamp over a coffin the size of a breadboard, and the very first thing I felt was suspicion. And then I opened the drawer, the second drawer under the bench on the left. It always stuck. You had to lift it and pull at the same time. And I knew that, and I have never been able to explain how I knew that. Inside there was a notebook, black cover, soft at the corners. the kind you buy at the hardware store for keeping seed prices. Every page was a name, and under it a date, and under the date a number, and under the number a set of measurements in his handwriting, which was small and square and leaned backward. The names were our people, our district and the 2 districts over, and some from Elkhart County. Names I had cooked for, names I had sat behind in church, names I had stood beside at other funerals with my hands folded, not knowing that my own husband had measured them. And the numbers were their ages. Some of them were 81, 78, 64, and some of them were 4, and 3, and 1, and one of them said 9 months. I counted them twice by lamplight because I did not believe the first count. 31 of them were children. And in the front of the book, across the top of the first page, in that same backward-leaning hand, he had written 4 words in Dutch. Ki kind sat warda, no child should wait. That is when I understood what was on the bench. He was not building that coffin for anybody. He was building it for whoever would need it next. He kept one ready, always. Standing finished in the corner under the muslin, sanded and waiting, so that when a family in our district lost a child, and in a world without telephones and without cars and without hospitals close by, they did. That family would not have to wait 2 days while a man cut and joined and sanded. They would come in the morning, and it would already be there. And every single time one was used, he built another one that same week. 19 years he did that. I worked out the dates later. 19 years of building a coffin for a child who had not died yet, handing it over and quietly going back out to start another one. He never charged for a single one of them. There is a page at the back of that book with a tally, and every mark on it is a coffin, and there is not one number in that book that means money. 19 years, 40 steps from my kitchen, and I did not know. I sat down on his stool, and I stayed in that shop until the lamp burned low, and by the time the light came gray in the windows, I understood 3 things. And I have not changed my mind about any of them in 42 years. The first thing, everybody knew. The men knew. The bishop knew. The women knew, because the women always know, and every one of them assumed I knew too. Because who would not know a thing like that about her own husband? Nobody was hiding it. That is somehow worse. I was not kept out. I was simply never let in, and there is no door you can point at when that is what happened. The second thing, if I opened that shop, they would come, not for chairs, and I could not finish what was on that bench. I did not have the hands for it, and I did not have the heart for it, and if I opened that door and someone came and I had to say no, then a family would wait. And Amos had spent 19 years making certain that no family ever waited. And the third thing, the true thing, the one I did not say out loud to another living person until I was 76 years old. I locked that door because I was angry. I was angry at a dead man the morning after his funeral. And in my community, a woman was not permitted to be angry at anything, let alone at a good man in the ground. There was no sentence I was allowed to speak. There was no room I was allowed to say it in. So I turned a key. That locked door was the only sentence I was ever allowed to finish. And then the first Sunday came, and somebody left something at that workshop door. And the Sunday after that, somebody else did. What happened over the next 11 Sundays, I cannot carry in 20 minutes. There are things this recording cannot hold. The names, the counting, the drawer, the dress I kept for 27 years. 3 years ago, I wrote all of it down. The book is called The Sundays. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Now, I want to tell you about Barbara because for a long time I believed this was my marriage and my failing and my strange husband, and it was not. Barbara was widowed at 34. Her husband made harness. 2 months after the funeral, she found a coffee can on a shelf in the back of his shop, and inside it a folded paper with names on it, and beside the names, amounts, debts, money owed to him by families in our district for work he had already done, and every one of them had a line drawn through it. He had forgiven all of it for years and never told her, not once, not even the winter they ate potatoes, because there was nothing else. She told me about it at the wash line with clothespins in her mouth, the way you tell someone the thing you have been carrying for a decade. And then she took the pins out and she said, "Anna, I did not know my husband was a generous man until he was dead, and I have never decided whether that is a beautiful thing to find out or a terrible one. I have thought about that sentence every year since. It was not one man's secret. It was not my marriage. It was a whole way of being a man, taught the same way in every house on that road. And the women in those houses were all married to somebody they were only going to meet properly once he was gone. And I want to be very clear about Amos, because this part matters more than anything else I have said. He was not a secretive man. He was not cold. He held my hand under the table at other people's weddings when he thought nobody could see. When I lost the one between Mary and Samuel, he sat on the edge of that bed for 3 hours and did not say one word and did not leave. He was not hiding the notebook from me. It was in an unlocked drawer in an unlocked building 40 steps from my kitchen door, and I could have walked in there any day of my life. He was doing the exact thing he had been taught every single day since he was a boy, that love was. Carry it yourself. Do not set it in her lap. Spare her. He was never once told that a wife might want to be handed something heavy. That being handed the heavy thing is how you find out you are trusted. Nobody told him that. Nobody told me I was allowed to reach for it. We were both obeying, and we were both alone. And we were obeying so well that we did it in the same house for 22 years without ever colliding. The words for this came to me very late, and they did not come from my church. 11 years ago, my younger sister was dying, and a hospice nurse came out to the house 3 times a week. An English woman named Denise, gray hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain. She sat with me in the kitchen one night while my sister slept, and I do not know why, but I told her about the shop, all of it, the lamp, the muslin, the notebook, the 31. She was quiet for a while, and then she said 6 words to me. You weren't spared. You were left out. I have prayed for 83 years. I have sat on hard benches for 3-hour sermons in 4 languages of silence, and none of it ever did what those 6 words did in my own kitchen at 2 a.m. And then she said one more thing, and this is the one I hear when I cannot sleep. She said he counted them alone. 31 children. He wrote every name down by hand. He carried that book out to that drawer and put it back and shut the drawer that stuck. And then he came in and washed his hands and sat down at my table and ate his supper and asked me about the garden. 19 years he counted them alone. And he had a wife 40 steps away with 2 good hands and a strong back, who would have counted them with him. Gladly, every one, if he had ever once been permitted to ask. Now I am not going to let you leave here thinking my people were cruel, because they were not, and I will not have it said. When Amos died, our corn was standing in the field. I did not ask a single person for a single thing. By Thursday it was picked and in the crib, and I never found out who did it. And if I had asked, they would have changed the subject. That is not charity where I come from. That is Tuesday. For 42 years, that community filled my wood box before I noticed it was low. They sat with me. They buried my children. My Freundschaft, my whole kin network, 300 people deep, showed up for every frolic and every funeral without being called. And I have found nothing in the English world since that comes close. I would not trade it, not 1 hour. But there is no scripture that says a man must carry the dead alone. There is no ordnung that requires a woman to learn who her husband was from a notebook in a drawer that sticks. And there is no God I have prayed to for 83 years who made 2 people one flesh, and then intended one of them to do the counting by himself in a cold room, while the other one made supper 40 steps away. Love that cannot be handed to anybody is not a gift. It is a weight with your name written on it, and he carried his and mine both, and it did not make me lighter. It made me a stranger in my own marriage, and I did not find out until the night before I put him in the ground. Every one of us gets a morning, the morning after, the morning you find the notebook, or the coffee can, or the letter, or whatever it is that is waiting in your family's locked room. And on that morning you decide what to do with what you found. I turned a key. I was 41 years old, and it was the only thing I knew how to do. And I do not entirely forgive myself for it, and I do not blame that girl either. If you grew up in a house where the men carried everything alone, and everybody called it strength, I see you. If you found out who somebody really was only after they were gone, and you have never been able to decide whether that was a gift or a robbery, I see you. And if there is a door in your family's house that nobody opens, and everybody has agreed on a gentle reason why, and the gentle reason is not the true one, I see you most of all. I am the Amish widow who never reopened her husband's workshop. I am 83 years old, and I was that widow, and I still am. That door is still locked. I am not going to open it now. But I have told you what is behind it, and after 42 years I have learned that those are not the same thing, and one of them you can still do when you are old. The Sundays. What 20 minutes cannot hold. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The morning is yours, if you decide it is.